What's up, party people, and welcome back to the shop. Today I'm super excited to share with you my router table build. This router table is specifically built around the Jessamine tabletop because I have a Jessamine tabletop. I've had it for years. It's a fantastic table, so I actually custom built it just for this. So if you have a Jessamine tabletop, this router table is for you. Because I've scoured the internet to see if there's any kind of router tables that fit this top, and it's just a bunch of generic crap. So I decided to build my own. Why not? That's what I do. I mean, I build stuff. I build stuff with wood. So, you know, why not build my own? Yeah. And I built this router table in the same vein as my workbench. It's pretty much similar to the same design. It's just a little bit smaller. And to maximize space in the router table, I'm going to make the 4x4s and the 3x3s and the 2x4s and the 2x3s. So basically, I'm going to lop off a 1/2 inch off of each side of the 4x4s and one side of the 2x4s. So basically, it's going to be like 3x3s and 2x3s. That makes sense. Okay, let's get into specifics. First off, it has a pretty sweet little pull-out bit drawer with a French cleat shelf in it, which is pretty sweet. I haven't seen that before, so I spent a good amount of time designing that. The router table also has 3 pretty good sized drawers. One long pull-out drawer for all of your accessories for your router table. 2 larger drawers at the bottom that will hold larger things like sleds, and you put the wheels in there, you know, anything that's a little bit bigger. The interior cabinet and the drawer fronts are made out of birch plywood. The drawers are also made out of the 1/2 inch pre-finished drawer ports that I always use in all my videos. I just actually used the last bit of it. I also built some dust collection into the router table. First off, we have a 4-inch inlet port on the back of the table that is covering a 4-inch hole that goes right into the cavity of the router table. And attached to that 4-inch inlet is a dual port adapter for my dust collection. The port has a 2.5 inch hole on the top of it that goes all the way up to the fence so it can get the top dust. Also, there's a plexiglass door in front of the cavity for the dust collection that has holes drilled into it to make the dust collection a little bit more efficient because it brings in positive pressure and pulls out the negative pressure. Thank you everybody for being here. Take off your jacket, kick off your shoes, and enjoy the build. So let's get to it. And this build was going to start off at the miter saw station. I am breaking down all of the 4x4s to a final length. We're going to take these over to the table saw and slim them down a little bit. And this is the last time you're going to see the Delta Cruiser because I replaced it mid-video with the old reliable DeWalt. And now it's time to cut down the 4x4s to 3x3s. I'm basically cutting off a 1/2 inch on 2 of the ugliest sides. I also ran one side against the joiner first before I took it to the table saw. And I'm using the Klingspor Rip Blade to accomplish this, and this blade is fantastic. Look how pretty this is. Oh yeah, it's super pretty. And next we're going to go back over to the table saw and break down a bunch of 2x10s I had laying around the shop for these support stretchers. These basically are going to be broken down into 1.5 by 3 inches to match the 4x4s we just broke down. And as you know, I do not like to do math. Math is stupid. So I'm going to mark out some layout lines for the half lap joints. But instead of doing some complicated formulas and trigonometry and geometry and I don't know, social studies, whatever, I'm actually going to use the parts to go into the half laps as a reference measurement. This makes life so much easier. And next we're going to take the part over to the table saw and we're going to make the first cut, and then we're going to finish the rest of it on the bandsaw. And I just realized the guides on my bandsaw need to be readjusted because the blade is deflecting backwards way too much. So I will be hitting up Alex Snodgrass's bandsaw tune-up video for that specific bandsaw. And next we're going to take the piece back over to the table saw and we're going to cut out the half laps for the bottom. I'm going to make a curve cut wide enough for my bandsaw blade, and then we're going to finish it off on the bandsaw. And also, if you don't have these tools and you still want to build this project, you can make these parts out of 2 2x4s glued together. And then you'd simply just size them up. I'll have all the details in the plans to do that. And now on to assembly. If you notice that the left leg is a little wonky there, yeah, that's because I got a little overindulged on the bandsaw and cut that by mistake. So I went back and fixed it. And if you notice, I actually used glue on this for some reason. So now it's not JP proof. So if, you know, I screw up, I have to do the whole thing over again. Also, yeah, go ahead and pre-drill your screws because I could have split this very easily, but I did switch to a countersink after this. I also used a trigger clamp to pull the pieces tight to the top rail. This is going to make your assembly very square. And now I have wised up and I'm using the countersink bit to secure the top rail to the side support. And I'm also using 2-inch deck screws for this operation. And next we are going to add pocket holes to all the frame support parts. This is the HD pocket hole jig. This thing is absolutely amazing. I used it for the workbench and it is solid as a rock. And as I mentioned before, this whole project is built around the Jessom router tabletop. So the first thing I'm going to do is assemble the top frame by attaching the front and back aprons to the left and right stretchers. And then I'm going to take them over to the matchstick bench and put them directly in between the two side supports. And notice the frame fits perfectly between the two fence brackets. And I'm going to use 4-inch lag screws to attach the frames to the side supports. And here is the reason why I assembled the outer parts of the frame first. I'm going to install the interior frames, but I'm going to make sure that they are absolutely flush with the opening for the router plate. This will make absolutely sure that that router plate and the router inside will not interfere with any of the stretchers. And now we're going to move on to assembling the bottom frame support. And the frame support is assembled like your standard 2x construction frames. There is a front and back apron, 2 side stretchers, and then you have your support stretchers in the middle that are equally spaced. And next I'm going to use a spacer to prop up the bottom frame so it's even with the side supports. Then I'm going to use a clamp and some more lag screws to attach it. And I would like to let you know that the plans will be available on my website, and there will be a link in the description below. New tool alert. Yes, that is the new Milwaukee track saw, and it is absolutely fantastic, but I also left the depth of the blade way too deep, and it cut right through my workbench, my brand new workbench. Yeah, not happy about that. But the top is replaceable, so we're going to move along. So I'm going to break down some plywood for parts for the interior cabinet. And your track saw works a lot better when the depth of the blade is set to the correct depth. This is buttery smooth. And the moral of the story is to take time and set up your tools properly so you don't destroy things that you're working on. But one thing that is set up properly is my table saw. So we're going to take all the parts over to the table saw and we're going to cut them to a final dimension. I designed this cabinet to utilize 1 sheet of plywood. The plans will have a detailed cut list and plywood breakdown diagram. And you notice that the 720 jig has some really gnarly dust collection there. It's because the hose was stopped up and I did not know that, but I went back and fixed it. And now we're going to move on to cabinet assembly. I'm going to install the bottom to the 2 sides. Make sure that bottom part is on the inside of the sides, not on the outside. And the next step will be to install the bottom divider. This divider is placed directly in the middle of the cabinet. So I'm going to use a spacer and some clamps to attach it with the pocket holes. And the next step will be to install the bottom shelf. The shelf will be the bottom support for the middle drawer. The shelf is fastened to the bottom divider with pre-drilled screws and pocket holes on the sides. A spacer is used that is the same width as the bottom divider, and a trigger clamp is used to straighten everything up. We'll make sure this is not bowed when we screw in the pocket holes. Once that shelf is fastened, we're going to install the second shelf with some spacers. And now moving on to the top right compartment. This compartment is actually going to be the compartment that holds all the electronics for the switch. I'm using a spacer and then locking it down with pocket holes. And I'm going to use that same spacer on the other side. Then the last step is to install the top. I'm actually going to change these later in the video, but this is what I'm doing for now. Also note the top left compartment is installed the same way. Next, a pass-through hole is drilled out to accommodate the power cord for the router. And I'm going to go ahead and install the drawer slides now because it will be virtually impossible to install them once the cabinet is set into the frame. And I'm using the Rockler Universal Drawer Slide Jig to install the drawer slides with a minimum of 4 screws in each slide. I have to remove the top left compartment to install the drawer slides for the French cleat drawer bit slide out tray, which I will show you how to build in just a minute. And once the bottom drawer slide is installed, I'm going to go ahead and put the top left compartment components back and mark a line so I have somewhere to reference the top drawer slide. And as I said before, the top right hand compartment is going to house all the electronics for the router. So I'm going to install a backer board here to have an attachment point for the false drawer fronts. And while I have the frame still on the workbench, I'm going to go ahead and install the removable casters. I found these casters on Amazon and they are some of the best casters I've used. Oh, there's a problem there. Hold on, back it up. All right, so the screws that are supplied with the casters apparently stick out too much for you to actually slide the casters in. So I replaced each screw with a flathead deck screw. Now the caster will slide into place. These casters are removable and they are locked down with this little pin. So once you have this router in place, you can take the pin out and then you can store the wheels into one of the drawers that we are about to build. With that being said, we're going to go over to the miter saw station and we're going to knock out some drawer parts. And I will be using the last bit of my pre-finished drawer box parts. They are pre-finished, pre-edge banded, and they are a 1/2 inch. This will save you a lot of money on materials in the future. And the first step will be to batch out all the sides for the drawer parts. The sides are all going to be the same length. And this would not be a Foxhole woodworking video without a laser. I break out the laser to get the spacings of my drawer points. The problem here is that the laser's battery was dying and these measurements were off by about 1/16 of an inch. So basically what I'm doing here is you measure the openings of your drawer boxes and then you subtract 1 inch. And then you add 2 pieces that are the same exact width of that material and butt them up against your stop and then butt up the piece against those. And then you will have deadly accurate drawer fronts and backs. And that is as long as your laser measure is not running out of battery juice. For the larger compartments on the bottom, the parts were too short for the miter saw, so I'm going to take them over to the table saw and use the miter gauge. The same process is used here as well. And the next step will be to add pocket holes to all the drawer parts. I'm using the 1/2 inch setup here, and as you notice, the dust collection has been fixed and it's absolutely perfect. And we're going to do the same song and dance we do in all my videos to assemble the drawer parts. But the one thing I'm doing differently here is before I drive in the pocket hole screws, I'm going to put my drill in reverse and kind of make a little pilot hole and then drive the screws in. By doing this, it makes the wood move a little bit less. And for the bottoms of the big drawers, I'm going to use 3/4 inch plywood. These are going to hold a little bit heavier things, so that 3/4 inch plywood will give you some extra support. I'm just going to glue and tack them into place. And after the bottom has been tacked into place, I'm going to take a trim router and flush up all the sides. The middle drawer is a lot shorter than the bottom drawer, so off camera I took the last 4 drawer parts and ripped them down to size. And then we're going to assemble the drawer the same way we did the bottom drawers. And next I go back to the Milwaukee track saw and cut out a piece of 1/2 inch plywood for the bottom of the middle drawer. Then I take that piece over to the table saw and cut it to final dimensions. I'm cutting this a little bit oversized so we can do a flush trim with the router. And then we're going to repeat the process again by just gluing and tacking the bottom into place. And when you're using the flush trim router, make sure that your bit is adjusted so that it does not go into a pocket hole. And next we're going to install the drawers onto the slides. I'm doing this a little bit differently than I usually do it. I usually just take the slides and put them on a flat surface and reference the bottom. But I was lazy and I just did it the old-fashioned way. And I'm going to have to go ahead and say I hate the old-fashioned way. And if you notice on the drawers, there is a part that is shaved off on the bottom. This is because the laser measures batteries were running low, and once that happens, the laser measurement is not accurate. So once we replace the battery, it fixed this problem. But for now, I have to shave off the bottom of them to make them fit properly. And now it's time to start putting everything together. This cabinet should slide into that frame pretty smoothly. And notice that I have 2 stops on the front of that frame. This is going to give me my setback for the drawer fronts. And once those cabinets are in place, go ahead and lock them into the frame with some screws. As you notice, once I screw these sides in, the bow will actually correct itself. Now on to installing the paddle switch. Now this hole that I'm drilling is actually too small for the plug to pass through it. So to fix this problem, I'm going to get a piece of plywood and attach it to the side, and then use a bigger Forstner bit right over that hole and make it larger. Now the plug actually slides through. And then reattach your paddle switch. And next we're going to work on the drill bit storage. I think I designed this drill bit storage about 32 times, but I think I got it nailed down now. So first off, we're going to drill out all the holes for the 1/2" router bits for the bottom part. And don't worry, these spacings will be listed in the plans with the complete build steps. And now we attach the bottom bit holder to the side. And now we're going to move on to build the French cleat top shelf. I'm going to mark in the middle here, and then we're going to take it over to the miter saw and we're going to cut it out. Do not attempt this at home. I am highly trained in the art of dumbassery. So if you're going to attempt this, please make sure that that piece is clamped to the fence and your hand is nowhere close to that. Actually, on second thought, don't even use a miter saw. Go over to the table saw and do this. So if you actually find that piece and it did not fly across your shop, go ahead and attach it to the second shelf. The second shelf also has the same spacings as the bottom shelf. And the top part of the cleat is attached with glue and crown staples. Use crown staples because they're stronger than brad nails. I said what I said. So I wasn't really sure if this is going to work, so I have not attached these parts to the slide out tray yet. So I'm going to put them in place temporarily, and then we're going to drop that top shelf onto them, and it works absolutely perfect. Beautiful. All right, so now go ahead and attach those parts to the tray with glue and crown staples. I actually rebuilt this tray with 1/2" plywood because I added some hardboard to the bottom of each shelf so the drill bits would not fall all the way through the hole. So once you're finished playing with the drill bits, go ahead and take that tray over to the top left-hand compartment and install it on the drawer slides. This is a little complicated because that tray is a little top heavy, so make sure you're pushing down on the back when you're installing the catches. Also, the tray is a little bit oversized and it's a really tight fit, so this is another reason why I rebuilt it with 1/2" plywood. And now back over to the table saw, and we are going to mill out all of the parts for the drawer fronts. The drawer fronts are going to be made out of one consistent piece, so all the drawer fronts will have a consistent grain pattern. And once the piece is cut to final dimensions, go ahead and add a carpenter's triangle so we can keep that grain pattern in order. And once all your parts are cut out, we're going to go ahead and add some drawer pull holes. I'm using this knockoff cabinet hardware jig thing that's like 50 bucks on Amazon. And I know why it's 50 bucks now, because it's really flimsy. It doesn't stay square, and it bends, and it does all kinds of weird stuff. So moral of the story is go ahead and buy stuff that's not knockoffs. Buy the real thing. And now we're going to attach the drawer fronts to the drawer boxes through the drawer pull holes. Now we're going to go over to the table saw, and we're going to mill out some smaller drawer front for the pull-out tray and the false fronts for the top right-hand corner compartment. And next we're going to attach the false drawer fronts to that backer board we installed earlier. And next we're going to remove one of the stretchers, because I'm going to make a change here because I don't have enough room to put my hands through that to get the electronics plugged in. So I'm going to cut out a piece of this with a multi-tool and then kind of beat it with a hammer because, you know, it stole something, so it needs to be beat. And once that piece is removed, I'm going to go put another strip in the back to support the middle divider. Now this is going to give me ample room to put my hand into that hole and attach the cords. This change will be reflected on the plans. And next I'm going to install the false drawer fronts on the right side and then the drawer fronts on the router bit tray. The screws are going to be embedded into the piece of wood just because the screws are not long enough to go through the back. And as always, I use a Empire square to get my 1/8 inch spacing reveals. And to attach this, I'm going to use a crown stapler and kind of shoot it up behind the handle so you don't see it. And then I use an extended bit on the drill and secure those drawer fronts from the back with a couple of screws. And then next we're going to install the drawer pulls on the rest of the drawers. I'm going to transfer the holes to the drawer box and then attach the drawer pull from the back. I'm also going to attach some screws to the back of the drawer fronts to keep them in place. And now let's move on to the back. Now the laser measure has fresh batteries in it and now it's like incredibly accurate. So I'm going to take a measurement of all sides of the back and then we're going to go over to the table saw and cut out another piece of plywood. This plywood needs to be the exact same size as your measurements because we want a very tight fit. And once you test fit the back, go ahead and add some countersink holes so we can attach the back to the cabinet. And next I'm going to add a through hole for the power cable. This is so you can pull the power cable through the hole and plug it into the wall. Then the next step is to add a 4-inch hole for the dust collection. And when you're doing this, make sure you remove the damn screw out of the way. And this is what we got going on for dust collection. We got some hose clamps. We have a 2.5-inch hose. We have a 4-inch inlet, and we also have a dual port hose adapter. And after pre-drilling some holes, we're going to go ahead and attach the inlet to the back of the router table with 4 screws. And then attach the dual port hose adapter to that inlet and lock it down with the hose clamp. Next, I'm going to trim the 2.5-inch hose so I have enough clearance to go from the fence to the dual port hose adapter. And I have enough slack in there so I can move that fence back and forth. And now for the moment of the truth. Let's see how bad this sucks. Yep, that's pretty sucky. And now we're into the home stretch. I'm going to mill out some parts for the plexiglass door. And yes, I am using plywood for these parts because that's the only thing I had on hand and they will match the rest of the door fronts. So I'm just going to go with it. They'll probably fail eventually, but whatever. And you notice that the lighting on the miter saw is much improved because me and my uncle installed some new lighting above. We also installed an AC unit, which makes the shop so much better in the summer. And thank you, Uncle Mike. And now we're going to put the router table to the test. I'm going to use a tongue and groove bit to mill out the parts for the drawers. First step is going to be the groove that goes into all the parts. And then next I'm going to use a coping sled to mill out the tongues. I'm not a very big fan of this coping sled. I'm probably going to get a new one or might build a new one, but it worked for right now. I still don't like this thing. And then we're going to trim out the plexiglass to final dimensions. Next, I'm going to mark out some holes and we're going to take it over to the drill press and drill out the holes. This is going to make the dust collection a lot more efficient because it adds positive pressure to the inside of the router table. And like I mentioned before, we're going to take the plexiglass over to the drill press and drill out the holes. The holes are not evenly spaced. I know this. Please don't give me crap in the comments. I understand. Also, when you're drilling out these holes, make sure that you have that piece of plexiglass clamped down because if you let go of it, it will spin around and probably cut your finger off. And now after you're done with all the milling of the plexiglass, go ahead and remove the protective paper. And this is like really super satisfying except for this part where it did not come off all the way in one single piece, which irritated the crap out of me. But it's okay. It came off. So I guess that's all that matters. And next we're going to go on to the glue up of the door. So we're going to add glue to the tongues and we're going to slide them into the grooves. Let's go ahead and slide the plexiglass into the grooves and then attach the top part. And then use a couple of clamps and glue it up and let it sit for about an hour. And then I'm going to sand the whole door to 180 grit. And then I'm going to use the Craig door hinge jig to drill out some 35mm holes for the door hinges. So this is where I screwed up. The hinges that I bought were frame hinges and not frameless hinges. So I had to come up with a concoction to actually add a face frame inside of the cavity so this door would open up properly. And the hinges are apparently soft close, which is completely useless. So now you see why I have to have the face frame part. So I'll put the drawer into place and snug it up tight, and then we're going to screw it down to the side of the cabinet. And everybody knows that the screws that come with hinges are absolute crap. But I have the offset attachment to my drill, which made this a little bit easier because it's a very tight confined space. I eventually removed these screws and put in the shorter deck screws, which worked a little bit better. So next we're going to attach the drawer pull for the door. This is just a simple install, centered it up, drilled a through hole, and then screwed it in tightly. I also added a magnet catch to the side of the door so it will stay in place when the dust collector comes on. This was absolutely crucial for this door. And for the last step, I'm going to sand the whole cabinet down to 220 grit. I will eventually add some finish to it, but at the moment I am not going to do that just yet. Hey guys, thank you for sticking around. And because you stuck around, I'm going to give you a special discount code for the plans for this router table. For the month of October, they will be 50% off with this code right here. Pretty sweet, huh? That's just my appreciation to you for sticking around to watch the end of the video. Also, I will have a bundle plan available soon for the miter saw station, the workbench, and the router table with a pretty hefty discount, so stick around for that too. As always, thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and cheers.